Welcome back to Snail Story, where the smallest stories touch the deepest parts of our hearts. Today, I have a truly special love story to share with you. A humble waitress once gave a single coin to pay a stranger's bus fare. What she didn't know was that the man she helped had once been a millionaire, who just walked away from all his wealth and glory, and that one small act of kindness became the turning point of both their lives. From a quiet bus ride to a bakery by a forest stream, from two strangers to a place to come home to. Join me as we dive into this touching story. Poor girl pays bus fare for a stranger. Not knowing he is millionaire, what he did surprised everyone. Let this story remind you of the power of kindness, of choosing your own path, and of true love. If you enjoyed gentle, heartfelt stories like this one, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next stories from Snail Story * that late afternoon. The sky over the suburbs was cloaked in a dull gray hue. The hills stood silent, wrapped in a lazy mist drifting past the bare trees. Aidan Clark, the heir to the Clark International Hotel's empire, was driving his rugged SUV deeper into a remote town nearly 3 hours from the city center. He had come to check on the progress of a new hotel project his corporation had just broken ground on. It was supposed to be a straightforward task, but in truth, it served as the perfect excuse to escape the endless meetings, the hollow social gatherings, and the ever-watchful eyes of the upper class. By the time he left the construction site, it was nearly 8 p.m. The GPS had lost signal somewhere in the hills. Rocky trails, faded signs, and a foggy windshield led him down a deserted street, nearly pitch dark and without a single street lamp. The wind whispered through the old rooftops, carrying with it an eerie sense of unease. Just minutes later, he realized he had taken a wrong turn and began to reverse. A loud thud struck the side window. 4 masked men had suddenly surrounded the car. Out of the car now, one of them growled. Aidan gripped the steering wheel tightly, then slowly let go in defeat. For the first time in his life, he had no choice but to obey someone else's command. In less than 5 minutes, the SUV had been ransacked, his phone, wallet, watch, and keycard all gone. The men vanished into the night, leaving Aidan standing alone on the empty street. Breath shallow, jacket disheveled, and a faint scratch marking his left cheek. No phone, no wallet, no car. No one knew where he was. He sighed, pulled up his collar against the cold, and began walking, hoping to find his way back to the town's main road. Dust clung to his shoes. The rocky slope stretched on with no sign of passing cars. The streetlights ahead flickered weakly in the dense, icy mist. About 15 minutes later, Aidan spotted a small bus stop at the end of the road. A battered sign swung in the wind, and a dim yellow bulb cast light over a rusted metal bench. There sat Hannah Brooks, a young woman with hastily tied back hair, resting her head against the lamppost, eyes half closed. Her faded teal diner uniform and worn apron said she'd just finished a long shift. She opened her eyes at the sound of footsteps, slightly startled, but her gaze softened when she saw the man approaching, tall, dirt-streaked, breathing heavily, with a weary look in his eyes. The bus pulled up. She stood, checked her wallet, just enough coins for the ride home. She stepped aboard, handed the driver the fare, and made her way to the back of the bus, settling near the window. Aidan lingered for a moment, then stepped up. "I'm sorry I was robbed. Lost my wallet, my phone. I don't have any money. Just need to get back to the town center." The driver eyed him with suspicion. "Yeah, I hear that one every day. No cash, no ride." Aidan stood silent, humiliation rising like a lump in his throat. For the first time, his wealth and power were useless. The Clark name, the title, the prestige, none of it could open this door. The bus was quiet until a soft voice spoke from the back. I'll pay for him. All eyes turned toward Hannah. She walked forward, pulling a few last coins from her wallet and offering them to the driver. Still in time, right? The driver shrugged, then nodded. Aiden stared at her in disbelief. She wasn't wealthy, if anything. She looked like someone who counted every cent, yet she had helped a complete stranger. You didn't have to do that, he said softly. But I wanted to, Hannah replied, not waiting for thanks as she returned to her seat. Aiden boarded and chose a spot a few rows behind her. Something unfamiliar stirred in his chest, not simple gratitude, but something deeper. In his world, everything had a price. But this woman, she wanted nothing from him. The bus jolted slightly as it started up again. Outside, the fog still dulled the streetlights to a muted glow. At the next stop, Hannah stood to leave. Aiden called out almost instinctively, "Thank you. You have no idea how much that meant to me." She turned, offered a small smile. Everyone needs help sometimes. And then she was gone. The door closed. All that remained was Aiden's gaze, following her figure until it disappeared into the night mist. That night, in a small rented room in the quiet town, Aiden couldn't sleep. He couldn't stop thinking about Hannah, the unknown girl, who paid a stranger's bus fare for no reason at all. And he knew that tomorrow morning he'd return to that bus stop not for a ticket, but for the girl who, with one small act, had shaken his entire world. The next morning. The sun had yet to rise fully, but the town sky was already beginning to glow. The first rays of light pierced through the trees, making the thin layer of mist along the street shimmer in a soft, ivory hue. Inside a modest room above an old corner store, Aiden Clark sat by the window, hands wrapped around a cup of weak coffee he'd made with an instant packet he'd hastily bought the night before. But he wasn't drinking it. His thoughts were elsewhere, back at a small bus stop, where a girl had quietly stepped on and off a bus in the cold night after using her last few coins to help a stranger. Aiden had never met anyone like Hannah. In his world, everything had an angle. People gave to get, but she didn't know who he was. She didn't want anything from him, and still she helped. She had entered his mind as softly as a breeze, yet stirred up something in him that he couldn't measure. He decided to return to that bus stop. No plan, no clear reason. He just knew he had to see her again, only to thank her properly, if only to know her name, or just to be sure she was real. The morning in the small town moved slowly. Hannah Brooks, still groggy from a short night's sleep, began her day again. She tied her brown hair neatly into a small bun, put on her apron, and stepped out of the brick-walled house she shared with her retired mother. Each morning, she walked 15 minutes to the bus stop to catch the earliest ride for her morning shift at a family-owned diner called Maple and Bean. She had worked there for nearly 3 years, juggling day shifts to pay for her evening college classes, while saving bit by bit for her dream of one day opening a small bakery. She had no idea that the man from the night before still remembered her. Aiden arrived near the bus stop early, wearing a low baseball cap and a simple denim jacket to look as normal as possible. He was afraid of revealing who he really was, afraid she'd feel distant if she knew. Sometime after 7, Hannah appeared. She stood alone, hands tucked into her jacket pockets, eyes looking out toward the long, empty road. Aiden stepped forward, his heart beating louder than necessary. "Hi," he said, voice a little awkward. Hannah turned, taking a second to recognize him. "Oh, you're the guy from the bus last night?" He smiled gently. "That's me. I never got to properly thank you. Last night I really didn't know what to do. If it hadn't been for you, I might still be wandering around somewhere." She shrugged lightly. "It's nothing. I just figured. If I were in your place, I'd hope someone would help me too." Aiden looked at her, and for the first time, noticed the quiet strength in this small woman. Not loud, not showy, just a kind of silent resilience born from a life that hadn't been easy. "I'm Aiden. Aiden Clark," he said, extending his hand. "Hannah." "Hannah Brooks," she replied, shaking his hand gently but firmly. When their hands touched, neither said a word. Something unfamiliar stirred between them, but neither dared to name it. That afternoon, Aiden stopped by the Maple and Bean Diner. He had seen the name on the badge pinned to her shirt. The glass windows were fogged up from the warmth inside, letting out the cozy scent of coffee and baked goods. It was an unassuming place, but it felt strangely comforting. Hannah was wiping down the counter when she saw him walk in. She looked surprised, but not distant. "You actually came." "I was passing by, thought I'd thank you again," Aiden said, though in truth, there had been no passing by involved. She tilted her head, a small, amused smile playing on her lips. "I didn't think someone in your dire situation last night would just happen to be passing through this remote town again this morning." Aiden laughed. She was sharp, direct hand, not easily fooled. "Honestly, I'm here checking on a hotel project. I didn't say anything last night because I was embarrassed. I'm not used to feeling helpless like that." Hannah looked at him for a moment, then nodded slowly. "So you're one of those people who has everything until suddenly you don't." Aiden was caught off guard. She had hit the mark. "Maybe," he exhaled. "That was the first time I felt like I couldn't control anything. And then you showed up." She didn't respond. Instead, she carefully placed a cup of hot coffee in front of him. No questions asked, but it was exactly right. Aiden picked it up, took a sip. Warm, just the right amount of bitterness. And real, just like her. After that second meeting at Maple and Bean, Aiden suddenly found a reason to linger in the town for a few more days. The hotel project he was overseeing, on the outskirts, had only just entered the foundation stage, nothing so urgent that it demanded an immediate return to the city. But deep down, he knew the real reason wasn't work at all. It was a girl named Hannah Brooks. The next morning, he returned to the diner. Same table by the window, same cup of coffee brewed by her hand. And then he came back the next morning. And the one after that tap first, Hannah was surprised by his repeated appearances. But after a while, she got used to it. What puzzled her more was the strange warmth she felt whenever he walked through the door. He didn't make a show of things, didn't put on airs. He just sat down, ordered a coffee, shared a few quiet words, and sometimes said nothing at all, just looked out the window in silence. One morning, after bringing his coffee, Hannah leaned on the counter and tilted her head slightly. "So, are you really staying here for work, or is my coffee just that addictive?" Aiden chuckled. "Probably both." She smiled just enough for her eyes to catch the light. "So what do you think of this town?" she asked. "Small, quiet, and real," he answered. "Very different from the world I'm used to." She nodded. Didn't press further, though her eyes hinted at deeper thoughts. For her, this town was everything where her father had once worked as a carpenter, where her mother still tended a garden in their tiny backyard, where her childhood was filled with memories of her first batches of baked goods. "And you? Where do you live?" she asked after a pause. Aiden shrugged. "The city. A penthouse apartment, all glass and concrete. Very modern, very cold." "Doesn't sound like a place to live," she said. "It's not. It's just a place to exist. To keep up with the grind." Her words made Hannah pause. She hadn't expected someone like him, neatly dressed, every word sounding like it had been polished in some boardroom, to say something that sad. "Then why don't you change?" she asked quietly. "Because I never knew what I really wanted. Not until someone paid for my bus fare." Her cheeks flushed slightly. She looked down and began wiping the counter, scrubbing the same clean spot over and over. Aiden noticed that whenever he looked at her long enough, Her eyes always darted away, but he didn't push. He just kept showing up more mornings. Then a few quiet afternoons. Listening, watching, being present. One rare, slow afternoon, when the diner was nearly empty, Hannah brought out 2 warm butter croissants and placed them on his table. On the house. "Just trying a new recipe. Let me know what you think." Aiden picked one up, took a bite, and looked up at her. "Incredible. And not just because they're free." "I was hoping you'd say that," she said with a small smile. Then, giving herself a little push, Hannah slid into the seat across from him. "So, you really work in hospitality?" she asked. Aiden nodded, cautiously. "Project and development management. But lately, I've been thinking about trying something different." "Why?" He looked at her. It took a moment before he answered. "Because I'm starting to realize glamour doesn't equal happiness." Hannah held his gaze. She didn't press. Some answers didn't need to be unpacked. "And you?" Aiden shifted the subject. "Ever dream of doing something beyond the diner?" "I'm taking night classes in business management," she replied. "I want to open my own bakery someday." He raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You're working 2 jobs." "3. I also take care of my mom." Aiden looked at her with visible admiration. "I think you have something that most people I know don't." "What's that?" "Inner strength." Hannah burst into a short laugh. "I thought you were going to say flavor or secret. Recipe? Those 2. He grinned. They both laughed. Just a brief moment, but enough to soften the distance between 2 very different worlds. From that day on, their encounters no longer felt awkward. Aiden was no longer the lost man. Hannah was no longer a nameless girl. They were 2 people from opposite ends of life, but they had found each other at a small point: kindness. And sometimes, that's exactly where the biggest things begin. That afternoon, the small town was bathed in the soft, golden light of early autumn. The forest leaves had begun turning shades of amber and crimson, painting the winding paths with a tranquil, breathtaking beauty. Aiden arrived at Maple and Bean earlier than usual. Carrying a small paper bag with 2 cinnamon butter cookies this time, he was bringing something for Hannah. "Afternoon tea?" he asked, holding up the bag as she opened the door to the diner. "Roll? Reversal today." She laughed. "Not that I'm complaining." The place was quiet. Hannah asked to leave early, saying she had a family matter, then walked with Aiden out of town along a narrow trail that led into the woods. Not far from the hotel construction site he was overseeing, the air in the forest was crisp and still. Only the chirping of birds and the rustle of dry leaves underfoot broke the silence. Hannah tucked her hands into her jacket pockets and tilted her head toward Aiden. "I didn't think someone in the hotel business would enjoy hiking through the woods. I imagined you more at home with elevators and boardrooms." Aiden smiled softly. "Honestly, I've never felt more at ease than I do now. No one's looking at me like a number. No one's asking about profits or stocks, except me asking." "About cookies and coffee," Hannah joked. "The most pleasant questions I've ever been asked." They kept walking until the forest opened up into a small clearing. Before them was a shallow stream, its water clear and trickling over mossy stones. In the distance, barely visible through the trees, stood scaffolding, part of the new hotel being built. Hannah stepped closer to the edge of the stream, sat on a flat rock, removed her shoes, and dipped her feet into the cool water. "I come here a lot. When I was little, my dad built a wooden shelter over there for camping," she said, pointing toward a grove of pine trees. "After he passed, I still came back now and then. Helps me remember that some things in life are worth holding on to, even when everything else changes." Aiden stayed quiet. He sat down beside her, saying nothing. Sunlight filtered through the leaves above, casting shimmering patterns on the stream's surface. Hannah glanced at him, head slightly tilted. The hotel project. Do you know who the main investor is? She asked. Aiden hesitated for a beat. I'm somewhat involved. So you really do work for a hotel group? My family owns it. Hannah blinked in surprise. Owns? You mean Aiden bit his lower lip, then looked her in the eye. I'm the primary heir to the Clark International Hotels chain. Silence. Hannah pulled her feet from the stream, looking at him for a long moment. So you've been hiding that from me? I didn't mean to hide it. I just didn't know how to say it. Aiden replied slowly. I wanted you to know me. Not my title or the headlines. It's just me. And you thought I wouldn't treat you the same if I knew the truth. It's not that. I was afraid. Afraid of what? Of being seen like everyone else sees me, as a walking black card. Hannah stood up, pulled out a handkerchief to dry her feet, then slipped her shoes back on. Her face wasn't angry, but a subtle crack had clearly formed between them. I don't care about money, Aiden, but I do care about honesty. I know, he said softly, and I'm sorry for not telling you sooner. I need time to think, she said quietly. I don't know if I'm upset about who you are, or because you didn't think I was strong enough to handle that from the start. With that, Hannah turned and walked back down the trail. Aiden remained by the stream, listening as her footsteps faded into the rustle of dry leaves. For the first time since the night he'd been robbed, he felt lost again in a place that had just started to feel like home. That night, Hannah sat on her bed, an old shawl wrapped around her shoulders. Her mother asked gently, You all right, sweetheart? I'm fine, Mom. Things aren't as clear as I thought they were. She didn't say much more. But something kept echoing in her mind. He kept the truth from me. He's also the only one who ever looked me straight in the eyes when he spoke. And that she couldn't deny made her heart ache in a way that felt painfully real. For 3 days after that walk in the woods, Hannah didn't see Aiden. Not because she was avoiding him, but because he disappeared. He didn't show up at Maple and Bean, didn't text, didn't call. Each morning, Hannah stood behind the counter, brewing coffee as usual, her eyes unconsciously drifting toward the door. But the wind chime remained silent. Her heart was a tangle of emotions. She didn't know whether she was angry, disappointed, or simply missing him. Deep down, Hannah had never truly hated Aiden. What hurt was the feeling of not being trusted. In her small, simple world, honesty meant everything. And when Aiden hid who he was, she didn't know what parts of their connection had been reland, what had just been a carefully worn mask. On the other side of town, in a makeshift office, near the construction site, Aiden sat quietly in front of his laptop. Dozens of unread emails lined his inbox. He had declined every Zoom meeting from the executive board. A file had just arrived. Draft of hotel management contract, Brookside Valley project, transferred from HQ. He closed it immediately. Everyone expected him back in the city next week to officially sign the documents and take over as CEO of Clark International Hotels, a role that had been reserved for him. Since he was 15, he used to dream of that title, but now the dream felt empty instead. His mind kept returning to the image of a girl standing beside a stream filled with disappointment. Though trying hard to hide her softness, Aiden stood and pulled out his phone. After a few seconds of hesitation, he dialed his father. Aiden, you finally decided to call, came Mr. Clark's voice through the speaker's turn, commanding. You ready to come back? Aiden drew a long breath. I'm calling to say I won't be coming back. Silence. For a moment, the line felt frozen. What did you just say? I don't want to take over the company. I don't want to live a life designed by someone else. This is about that girl, isn't it? She just helped me see that I can choose to live honestly. Not because she asked me to, but because I want to. You'd throw everything away for a fleeting relationship. No, I'm walking away from something that was never really mine to follow, the only thing that means anything right now. On the other end, there was only a heavy sigh. If you walk away now, Aiden, that door won't open again. Think carefully. Have Dad. The call ended. Aiden set his phone down and looked out the window. A soft rain had just begun to fall. Tiny droplets clung to the glass, blurring the familiar lines of his old world. For the first time in his life, he felt free. The next morning, the financial news reported a short headline. Clark International Hotels heir announces withdrawal from executive board. Declines CEO position. Hannah froze behind the counter, holding a newspaper left by a customer. Her heart skipped a beat. She read the headline again 3 times. Each bold letter seemed to pierce her. He really did it. For something or someone, she quickly untied. Her apron asked for the rest of the shift off and ran home. In her small room, she opened her laptop and typed Aiden Clark. Pages of results popped up, images of him at business conferences, charity galas, press events. A very different Aiden Clark, polished, distant, composed. So different from the man who sat by her window each morning asking about croissant flavors. And she realized something. She missed Aiden not for who he was in that world, but for who he was when he was with her. That afternoon, Aiden stood outside the door of Maple and Bean, hesitating before finally pushing it open. The diner was quiet. Hannah was wiping down a table. She looked up, her eyes freezing for a moment, then turning away as if gathering her thoughts. "You're back?" she asked, her voice soft as wind. "I came to say I'm no longer tied to Clark Hotels," he said. "I know," Hannah replied quietly. "I read about it." They looked at each other, long, wordless, unspoken. "Why?" she asked. Aiden stepped closer. "Because I want to see what happens when I stop living for others' expectations and start living by my own choices. And because I don't want to lose the person who helped me find that choice." Hannah was silent. After a moment, she turned slightly, her voice trembling just a bit. "I didn't know what to say. I used to think you were just a lost guy, but maybe it's me who got lost in my own feelings." Aiden stepped forward, gently taking her hand. "Then, let's find the way together. Can we?" She looked at him, he still holding doubt, but now with a flicker of trust, of warmth. A quiet moment settled between them, making space for something new, not grand, but real. And in that moment, surrounded by the smell of rich coffee and the golden hue of afternoon sunlight pouring through the glass, Hannah gave a small, honest nod. That day, Hannah left work early. In her hands was a bag of freshly baked pastries, warm with the sweet scent of butter and cinnamon. But she didn't head home like she usually did. Instead, she caught the late afternoon bus, heading toward the edge of town where the forest and the quiet stream still waited, just as they had since her childhood. This time, she wasn't going alone. Aiden was already there, waiting at the start of the wooded trail. His sleeves were rolled up, a bottle of water in one hand, a jacket in the other, just in case Hannah needed it. When she stepped off the bus, she smiled. "You look like you're preparing for a full-on mountain hike. Last time, you got cold after dipping your feet in the stream. I don't plan on making that mistake again." She laughed softly, saying nothing, but her heart warmed. They walked slowly beneath the forest canopy, the sound of leaves rustling beneath their steps. The sun leaned westward, painting the autumn treetops with golden light. When they reached the stream, Hannah placed the bag of pastries on a flat rock by the bank and sat down. Aiden stood for a moment, taking in the peaceful scene, then turned toward her, his gaze steady. "Hannah, you once said you dreamed of opening a bakery, right?" "Yeah. I still dream about it every day, even if I have no idea when I'll actually be able to make it happen." Aiden sat down beside her, his voice slow and thoughtful. Well, what if you had the chance to make that dream come true right now? Would you be ready? She turned to look at him, blinking. What do you mean? The hotel my family's company was planning to build in this area. It's currently sitting in limbo. No one's taken over the development rights yet. I can buy them back. But not to build some flashy resort. I want to create something smaller, more personal. A hotel that fits the soul of this place. And if you say yes, the bakery will sit right at its heart. Your bakery, your name, your rules. Hannah froze for a few seconds. She never imagined hearing those words from the man who, just a few weeks ago, had boarded a bus with nothing but the clothes on his back. "You're serious?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I've never been more serious. But why me? Because I believe in you. And because if I'm going to do something meaningful with my life, I want to do it with the person who made it all feel real." Hannah looked into Aiden's eyes. There was no humor there, no pity. Only a quiet certainty, soft but undeniable. She turned away. Heart overflowing with emotions she didn't yet know how to name: joy, fear, hope, and something deeper still, love. After a long pause, she whispered, "I need time to think. This dream, it's something I've carried so long. If I start now, I want to do it right." Aiden nodded. "I'll wait. As long as you're still dreaming, I'll be here ready to help make it real." That night, Hannah sat alone at her tiny kitchen table, surrounded by old magazine clippings of bakeries she'd once admired. The faded recipe pages her father had handwritten, and the small oven that had been with her for 4 years. Her dream had never left her. She just never thought someone would come along, reach out a hand, and say, "Let's do this together." The next morning, just as the sun peeked through the clouds, Aiden sat on the porch of his rental room when his phone buzzed with a message from Hannah. "Meet me at the usual spot this afternoon." "I have an answer." His heart skipped. That afternoon, they met by the stream. Hannah didn't speak right away. She sat down, slipped off her shoes, again dipped her feet into the cool water. Then she turned to Aiden, her eyes glassy but filled with steady resolve. "I'm in. But on one condition." "Name it." Aiden smiled. "I want to choose every brick, every color, every pastry. I don't want the bakery to feel like a part of a hotel. It has to be its own world. Mine, ours, if you truly mean what you will." "Say." Aiden nodded, no hesitation. "What will it be called?" Hannah looked out at the water, then smiled. "Sweet Haven. It means a place of sweet refuge." Aiden smiled back gently. "Then Sweet Haven will be our new beginning." Sweet Haven was beginning to take shape. The old plot of land near the stream where Hannah and Aiden had once walked and talked was now cleared, marked into sections, and prepared for its foundation. The first bricks had arrived. Blueprints were unrolled, each line drawn, not just with ink, but with the dreams they carried. Hannah was at the site almost every day. She wore a hard hat, steel-toed boots, and learned to read construction diagrams alongside the engineers. She didn't want to just be the one waiting for it to be finished. She wanted to help shape every detail. Aiden worked quietly behind the scenes, managing legal transfers, processing supplier payments, recruiting staff for the soft launch phase. Though he had once overseen multi-million-dollar developments, this was the first time he felt like he was truly building a home, not just a structure, but something with a soul. One chilly morning, Hannah arrived at the site with a basket of butter cookies and a thermos of hot coffee. She handed out breakfast to each of the workers before heading toward Aiden, who was bent over, studying the foundation plans. "Take a break," she said. "I brought breakfast." Aiden looked up and smiled warmly. "Is it true that every time you smile, a brick falls perfectly into place?" "If that's the case, this place will be finished ahead of schedule." She laughed. They sat together on a large stone at the forest's edge, eating cookies and watching concrete mixers roll by. "I used to think I'd spend my whole life in glass towers," Aiden said. "But right now, right here with you, I feel more at peace than I ever did anywhere else." Hannah looked at him, her eyes softening. "I used to think my dream was just something to dream about. But now, I believe some dreams need two people to make them real." That evening, they sat side by side, writing out a draft of ingredients for the bakery's upcoming pastry menu. Hannah was meticulous, choosing every type of flour, every flavor, every dessert tied to a memory. "Bus stop biscuits. It's kind of a joke," she said, winking. "But it's to remember the bus ride when we first met. What about the confused croissant?" Aiden grinned. "That's the one I made the first time you said you liked salty butter. I went overboard and nearly made a pretzel." She laughed. Aiden joined in, both of them smiling. These tiny stories, oddly enough, became the sturdiest foundation for the life they were building together. But even as they planned for their future, the world outside, especially the world Aiden had once left behind, was beginning to take notice of this quiet little town. A familiar name was returning, and with her came the first headwind they never saw coming. Her name was Rachel. The construction of Sweet Haven continued at full speed. The first wooden frames had gone up. The main kitchen, the heart of the bakery, was beginning to take shape. Hannah hand-picked every tile, sketched designs for cozy reading nooks and a balcony overlooking the stream. She spent hours with Aiden, discussing everything from paint palettes to the background music for the hotel lobby. Happiness seemed to weave itself into every breath. But just then, Aiden's past came knocking, wrapped in the proud, confident figure of Rachel Lawson. Rachel arrived without warning. A sleek black car pulled up at the edge of town. She stepped out in a full-length camel trench coat, gleaming leather boots, and perfectly styled golden waves. She didn't call ahead. She wanted to make an impression. While Aiden was instructing the plumbing team at the site, Rachel appeared behind him, one hand on her hip. "Can I talk to you?" she asked coolly. "Just for a minute." Aiden froze, surprise and discomfort clearly flickering in his eyes. "Rachel? What are you doing here?" "You really thought I wouldn't find out," she said, her voice edged with disbelief. "The media exploded when you gave up the CEO chair. I had to see it for myself to believe that Aiden Clark would walk away from everything for a bakery in the woods." Aiden stepped aside, voice calm but firm. "Well, now you've seen it. Maybe you should head back." "I didn't come to fight," Rachel said, her tone softening. "I came because I'm worried about you. You're being pulled away from who you are." "No one pulled me," Aiden replied. "I chose to leave." Rachel gave a slight smirk, tilting her head. "And this girl? What does she have that I don't?" "I stood beside you at every conference, helped build your expansion plan into Europe. And now you're giving all of that up for a waitress." Aiden's face hardened. "She's the one who showed me what really matters." At that moment, Hannah came walking up from the forest path, a watercolor sketch of the bakery layout in her hands. She froze when she saw them standing close. From where she stood, Rachel's hand was resting on Aiden's shoulder, her gaze intimate. And Aiden wasn't moving away. Though Hannah knew she shouldn't jump to conclusions, something tightened in her chest. That scene of being overlooked, compared, judged was all too familiar. She turned and walked away. That night, Aiden found Hannah in her kitchen, rinsing glasses at the sink. "I saw everything," she said before he could speak. "There's nothing between Rachel and me. I didn't know she was coming. I told her no, but you didn't push her away." Aiden fell silent. Not because she was wrong, but because she was exactly right. "I'm not jealous," she said softly. "I'm scared." "Of what?" "Of waking up one day and realizing you don't belong here. I'm not beautiful. I'm not rich. All I have is flour, butter, and a little dream." Aiden stepped closer, eyes steady. "You have something no part of that world could ever give me peace. A reason to want to come home." "But is that enough?" she asked, meeting his gaze. "Enough that you won't regret this." Didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded document, a legal statement renouncing all his shares and ownership rights in Clark International. He had signed it. Hannah's breath caught. "You actually did it?" "I didn't want to keep a safety net just to have an escape route. If I stay, it's because I choose this life. If I walk with you, it's because I believe in what we're building." A moment of silence, then 2 tears slipped down Hannah's cheeks. "I don't need you to prove anything with money, Aiden. I just need to know that you're not going anywhere." "I'm not going anywhere," he whispered. She smiled, a true smile, the kind with no doubt behind it. The next morning, Rachel left town. No goodbyes. No final meetings with Aiden. She knew. The man she once knew, the Aiden of boardrooms and grand strategy, was gone. As for Hannah, she returned to the site with a new design, a quiet little corner called the Pastry Library, a space to display recipes, stories, and customer favorites. Desserts. She named it Sweet Memories, and beneath a small chalkboard sign, she wrote in careful script, "Where kindness begins and stays." After Rachel left town, it seemed the storm had passed, but the waves she stirred kept rolling in. The media buzzed nonstop. Air gives up golden throne for girl with a rolling pin. Clark Jr. and the Love Bakery, from future CEO to small-town handyman. Clickbait headlines, twisted facts, dragging Hannah's name into the spotlight as the dreamy village girl. One article even detailed the death of her father and her difficult upbringing, as if it were tabloid drama. Aiden was furious. He had once believed walking away from the spotlight would bring freedom. But he hadn't expected that freedom to come at such a heavy cost, especially for those he loved. Worse still were the reactions from some of his former investors. They began pulling funds from any project associated with his name. Contractors grew hesitant, demanding upfront payments or inflating prices. One company even stopped halfway through laying the foundation, insisting on full payment before continuing. The local bank rejected their next loan application, citing lack of long-term financial guarantees. Pressure piled up, and Sweet Haven's construction nearly ground to a halt. Each morning, instead of the sound of drills and hammers, Hannah heard only the wind whispering through half-built walls. She saw Aiden changing. The man who used to joke at morning progress checks now fell silent, eyes distant, fingers gripping his phone without ever dialing. One morning, when Hannah brought coffee to the site, she found Aiden lifting a heavy sack of cement himself. His shirt was soaked in sweat, his face dusted with dirt. "Let me help," she said, walking toward him. "You don't have to," he started, shaking his head, but her steady gaze stopped him mid-sentence. They sat beneath a tree near the site. Aiden wiped the sweat from his brow. "I've sold the last of my shares," he said. "Every penny. We might have enough to finish, but there'll be nothing left." If this fails, he couldn't finish the sentence. "Then we start again," Hannah said quietly, her voice soft but unwavering. "You're not scared?" "I used to be. I was scared of being left behind, of failing, of not being enough. But now, the thing I fear most is seeing you go back to living in a suit someone else tailored for you." Aiden lowered his head. For the first time, he let himself lean on her, not from weakness, but because he finally understood what it meant to be held. "You know something, Hannah," he murmured. "I used to think success was about how much you could take, or how much you could own. But now I think it's about what you're able to hold on to when everything else is gone." "And what have you held on to?" she asked. "You," he said, looking directly into her eyes. That afternoon, the skies opened. With a summer downpour, work stopped. Hannah pulled Aiden into the bakery's unfinished kitchen. They lit a small gas burner and brewed ginger tea. Rain clattered against the tin roof, a gentle symphony amid their exhaustion. "You know," she began, eyes focused on the flame, "I used to be afraid you'd leave again, like my father did. I never said it out loud, but it haunted me every time I started to believe in someone." Aiden placed his hand on the table, speaking slowly. "You can check my heart, my phone, my wallet, or just stay beside me. I have nothing to hide, and I'm not going anywhere." Hannah smiled. A small smile, but one that held understanding and the beginning of trust rebuilt. From that day on, Hannah started sharing their sweet haven journey on social media. She posted glimpses of small moments, a cookie taste test, curtain fabric decisions, the morning light on freshly laid brick. People were drawn not just to the rustic charm, but to the quiet resilience she and Aiden showed through every challenge. One post captured special attention: the first cookie and the man who gave up a crown to stay. Within a week, it went viral. Commenters called it a modern-day fairy tale. A group of young investors passionate about sustainable living reached out. They offered to support community-focused aspects of the project: a library, an herb garden, and a resting lodge for seniors. Sweet Havens stirred back to life. Bricks were laid again. Workers returned. Drills sang like a heartbeat, finding its rhythm again. And love, like yeast rising in a warm loaf, grew stronger and steadier with each passing day. The early spring sun spilled gold across the quiet valley. Tiny green buds began to sprout along bare branches, hinting at a new beginning. And on that morning, Sweet Haven officially opened its doors. Locals from across the region gathered for the grand opening. Many were strangers, people who had followed Hannah and Aiden's journey online, moved by the story of a fateful bus ride and the man who gave up a crown to live his truth. The small hotel bakery stood nestled against the forest's edge. Its warm red brick walls, accented by white-trimmed wooden windows and clusters of purple asters trailing along the porch. A hand-carved wooden sign swung gently from a rustic rope. Sweet Haven, a place to come home to. Hannah wore a simple white dress, her hair tied up neatly, cheeks flushed with nerves. Aiden stood beside her in a soft blue shirt, gently holding her hand. There were no speeches, just a ribbon cutting, a smile, and a quiet bow to their guests. And somehow, that simplicity touched everyone more deeply than words ever could. Because in the way they looked at each other, there was no need for grand declarations. Here was real. The bakery opened with 8 signature pastries, each tied to a small story. A large chalkboard listed the names and the memories. Behind them, bus stop biscuits, recalling the day they met on that rainy bus ride. Confused croissant, the too salty first batch. Hannah baked after Aiden said he liked savory butter. Almost goodbye pudding. The dessert Hannah had planned to bake as her last before leaving him, but never had to. Broken hen-heeled lovers. Mousse, a double-layer raspberry mousse Hannah created after they reconciled following the storm, named Rachel. Guests smiled as they read and tasted. They weren't just eating pastries, they were stepping into the couple's world, a place where every crack had been carefully mended with love. That afternoon, when the bakery closed for its midday break, Hannah led Aiden to the old stream. It had since been cleaned up and paved with smooth stones, with 2 small wooden benches set nearby. They sat together, feet skimming the cool water, golden light streaming through the canopy. "I never thought it would go this far," Hannah said softly. "Me neither," Aiden replied. "I thought my life would always revolve around boardrooms, profit charts, and growth strategies. But now a warm cup of ginger tea, a tiny bakery, and a girl who smiles when she says my name, that's the entire world to me." Hannah turned to him, eyes glistening. "I used to think I'd live quietly, unnoticed, just baking and waiting to grow old. But then you came along, and everything suddenly had color. A tender silence settled between them. The stream trickled, birds chirped, and the scent of sweet bread still lingered faintly in her hair. Then Aiden stood up suddenly and dropped to one knee. Hannah froze. "Aiden," he pulled a small box from his shirt pocket. Inside wasn't a diamond ring but a delicate silver bracelet, engraved with the words, "For the girl who gave me a second life." "You don't have to answer today," he said. "But I want you to know, even after the dust settles, after the guests leave, after the 100th tray of pastries will still be here. And there's no one else I'd rather come home to each evening." Hannah took the bracelet, silent. Tears slid down her cheeks, quiet but warm. "I don't need time," she said. "I've known the answer since the day you walked back into the bakery looking at me like no one ever had before." She held out her wrist and fastened the bracelet herself. No ring needed. That small nod was more than enough. That night, Sweet Haven hosted its very first dinner reception. Nothing extravagant, just a long table under the porch. Golden lights strung between trees and rooftops, steaming pastries, local wine, and soft music playing from an old radio. Neighbors chatted and shared stories. One person said they'd found hope again watching Hannah and Aiden's journey. An elderly couple whispered, "It's like watching our younger selves." And in that space, Hannah and Aiden stood behind the pastry counter, slicing desserts and brushing hands. No vows spoken, no promises made. But everyone understood they had found their place to come home to. Not a location, but a person. And that's today's story. A single coin may not buy much, but a sincere act of kindness can change someone's entire life. Sometimes you won't know who you're helping, but that doesn't matter. Because true kindness asks for nothing in return, and true love, it always begins with the smallest acts of compassion. If you've ever helped someone, may and men been helped by someone. I invite you to share your story in the comments below. You never know, your experience might be the inspiration someone else needs today. Thank you so much for listening all the way through. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell to catch the next gentle tale from Snail Story, where little things create the most wonderful magic. See you in the next video. From all of us at Snail Story, good bye for now.